everyone, and welcome back. I have a problem. That problem is that I have a rather big trip coming up in October. I know it seems really far away, but it's not when you're making things for said trip. And it's going to be probably a couple weeks, maybe even 3 weeks, of traveling over to the UK and then getting on a transatlantic cruise back over to New York. And it's going to be specifically a vintage cruise. And I'm going to be spending probably the entire time I'm on this trip with a lot of very fashionable people in some very beautiful clothing. And I need to make sure that I am ready for this. My closet, though, definitely not ready for this. I have changed body shape and size a lot over the last 5 years, and on top of that, most of the vintage clothing that I used to wear all of the time isn't the style that I'm really interested in anymore. My tastes have changed, and even if I could fit into it and alter it, it just doesn't seem worth it. It makes sense at this point to sort of start over, to use this as a reason to start up a new vintage wardrobe that's going to fit me and fit my personality and get me out of the things to wear around the house phase that I've been in for the last couple years. The logical thing for this obviously is a capsule wardrobe. If you're going on a trip or you're trying to rebuild a new closet, and just makes sense to go with the capsule wardrobe concept. And though the idea of a capsule wardrobe seems relatively recent and new, it certainly was suddenly everywhere not that many years ago. The actual practice of it is much older. Shocking, I know. You are on this channel. Nearly everything is older than you think it is. That's basically the conclusion. So capsule wardrobes as a concept needed a few things in order to exist in the past. One, they needed the type of clothing that was able to be mixed and matched. A lot of gowns in the 19th century, fashionable ones at least, were meant to be made out of the same fabric and the same trim, and though they might have interchangeable bodices, a day bodice and an evening bodice, in order to save money on the entirely too large skirt full of fabric, they still were very often specifically coordinated. This starts to change at the end of the 19th century, as with many things, and more separates are becoming regular day fashion, not just practical wear, not work wear, not wear for those that aren't interested in fashion, but actual fashionable clothing. So that opens up the opportunity for something like what we consider a capsule wardrobe. On top of that, this is also the era where fashion magazines really come into their own. Vogue starts in 1892. There are fashion magazines prior to this, but at this point it's becoming cheap enough to print a lot of imagery in these magazines that more and more people are finding the visuals accessible, that they are able to put photographs, drawings, and prints more regularly in them. And magazines like Vogue recognize that it's not just the wealthy that are purchasing these magazines and looking at these things that they actually want to buy of the clothing. There are so many articles in these magazines talking about how to create a wardrobe for different purposes. Some create a wardrobe that's specific to this year, what you should buy every year, or what you should buy for this season, what's trendy right now, what you should buy if you are going through a major life change, if, say, you're going off to college. Another regular article topic, that of vacations. What do you take with you if you go on vacation to Europe, if you go on a cruise, if you go to this area or that area? What do you need to take with you? And a good many of these things specify on a budget, because that's the expectation. Vogue actually had a pretty long-running article series that was specifically how to create a wardrobe on a budget with the latest fashions. Some of them really focused on starting from scratch, some of them focused on making do with what you've got and updating it a little bit, but this idea is that everything needed to coordinate, everything needed to mix and match. There's an article that I found from 1918 that was particularly exciting because not only did I see it published in a lot of different magazines, but it apparently also had a corresponding film. I've yet to get my hands on this film. If anyone knows how to do that, it would be amazing. The article that I came across was titled Build Wardrobe on Unit Basis, and the film was called The New Art of Dress. And these were meant to go together so that way you could see how to build a brand new wardrobe. What pieces did you need? What concepts did you need to keep in mind as you were doing so? They specified that you needed a slip, an under tunic, a tunic, and a coat. There were other accessories that got mentioned, and there are far more details that get mentioned about how you choose these things, but that was their start with this, and here's how you mix and match these different parts. Sounds pretty familiar. The first paragraph starts, New York women are viewing with keen interest and favor the new and revolutionary system of the dress problem. The basis of this solution is the fact that the entire wardrobe, day and evening, indoor and outdoor wear, has been planned as a single unit. By this means, every garment has a definite practical as well as artistic relation to every other garment, thus permitting a greatly increased degree of economy. That's a really fancy way of saying a capsule wardrobe, let's be honest. So this is definitely not a brand new thing, but this is something that they're trying to really explain to people, especially when it comes to things like going off to college or going on vacation. That's not something that everyone did prior to that point. That was something that was really pretty rare. And so as more and more people have the ability to do that, to get on a train, to get on a ship, go on a vacation, to go off into adventure, they need to understand how to do these things, how to pack for these things, how to plan for these things. And so these magazines are there for them, because prior to that, travel very often included a lot of clothing in very heavy, large trunks that you needed assistance to get around. You weren't traveling yourself around. You had people that you paid to essentially do that for you. So the idea of just picking up some luggage, taking a bag or two with you that you are able to get around yourself is a really new idea. With this concept established, they very often start you with a list of basic garments that they think you need, which changes year to year, decade to decade. I'm focusing mostly right around 1920, that we're looking at 19 teens through 1920s and into the 1930s for a lot of these articles that I'm coming across, because that's my general favorite era for creating clothing. But most of them start off centrally also saying you need a color scheme. In order to make sure things mix and match, you need things to coordinate. Now you can do this very simply if you don't want to put a lot of effort into it and stick with entirely neutrals for your main clothing. Do some really bright or fun, colorful things for your accessories, scarves, hat, things like that, but stick with completely neutral for your main clothing. They also mention coming up with a very precise color scheme. Usually you start with a neutral tone. A lot of the later ones like to basically say black, brown, or navy, unless it's specifically summer attire. Then something like white, ivory, or gray might work instead, but you choose a color. And this goes for not just travel, but also for an annual wardrobe. Outside of specifically neutral things, they do admit that you can pick a specific color for a season and build everything up around that. There are neutral colors. They definitely acknowledge that color is very feasible and achievable. With these things, you just need to specifically choose how to coordinate things together, whether it is through color scheme like that, or taking it a step further by making sure that things mix and match in terms of their patterns. So some places will actually produce dresses in a lightweight silk and wool suits or coats or sweaters or other items that match it, that have the same pattern or coordinating pattern and color, so that way you can mix and match those things together. So there are ways of taking the color scheme and amplifying it just a little bit further, making sure that your patterns coordinate and your colors coordinate, and everything just kind of feels like it goes together really well. From there, you make sure you pick good fabrics. I don't just mean that in terms of quality, I mean that in terms of things that can travel well. If you're going to be stuffing this into luggage and carrying it halfway across the world, your dresses and suits and things need to pop out of this luggage pretty fresh, and you don't want them to be really heavy. So they specify things lightweight wools, crepes, uncrushable chiffon was a term that I came across pretty regularly, where they'll say it'll wrinkle a little bit, but as you pull it out and hang it up, it will lose its wrinkles overnight, so you'll be able to wear it the next day just fine. So apparently there was a great emphasis on fabrics that were meant to hold up. As for the clothes you need to bring, that changes from year to year, but they have a lot of similarities. They all start with a suit. You have to have a suit, a jacket and a skirt that are made out of the same fabric, coordinate very well, and go with a lot of things. You can put a lot of different shirts with this suit and change it up. You can put a sweater with it instead. Sometimes they recommend an extra secondary skirt. Dresses are, of course, in the mix. Sometimes they specify you need an evening gown for certain events, but that shouldn't be a main concern. That should be one or two at most if you even have a lot of stuff to go to. That's all you really need. For a dress, you want an afternoon dress. You want something that is going to not only take you through a lot of more formal daytime events, which there won't be very many on the cruise ship according to their recommendations, but as you're getting off the cruise ship, going into ports, embarking, debarking, you probably want something a little nicer for that, but it will do for most of your evening wear. It will do really well to go to dinner in. You can pair it up with a jacket or with a sweater or whatever it is to dress it up, dress it down, and change a few accessories, and that dress will be able to pull a lot of different things out of it. Then it starts to shift a little bit in terms of what other recommendations it has. Some will say that you want some sweaters, some will specify that you want a knit set, a dress and jacket that are both out of knit. A lot of them do specify that you want a shawl, scarf, wrap, something that is going to work to keep you warm in the evenings, but is a little bit more on the formal side, but isn't so fancy that you can't wear it for some day things. Some of them even mention reversible ones to cover a whole variety of different options and keep you from being too cold, which seems pretty important. They do specify on cruise ships that during the day, most people are just wearing pretty sporty things, things that you would normally wear to the tennis match, as it specifies, and that you need a comfortable pair of shoes for up on deck, something that you can be active in, really comfortable clothing for the day wear, and that everything else, you just kind of coordinate around these things. You choose practical shoes, make sure you've got good walking shoes no matter what you're doing, that they match with nearly everything. One pair of evening shoes should cover you for the entire trip. Hats, really important, though you need to make sure you don't go with the broad-brimmed hat because the wind will take that away on the cruise ship. And it's also less practical to pack, so go with shorter brimmed, even when that's not necessarily the trending style. And then from there, making sure that whatever else you decide to bring in addition matches up to those things. That they don't necessarily expect you to go an entire week or two with just a suit and a dress, but that's the basis of your wardrobe, and you can sort of fill things out. There's an expectation that you will wear things more than once. That's okay, that's normal. I will admit I personally am a little more interested in managing to challenge myself to get as much variety as possible. So I'm not just looking at their idea of a capsule wardrobe, I've also been looking at some of their garments that are meant to do multiple things. So I've been trying to come up with recommendations that they have, such as the slip plus an over tunic, an under tunic, whatever it may be, that I can change up garments as individual items that I can mix and match in ways that a single solid dress wouldn't necessarily be able to do. So that way I can get as many outfits of as many varying degrees of formality or attitude as I need out of them, and really focus in on making sure that it goes with at least 2 or 3 things. So that's where I'm starting. That's where I'm beginning with this. I've been looking at lots of different options for fashionable items, and I realized trying to keep track of all of this in my head isn't going to happen. So I'm essentially making digital paper dolls with all of the different fabric options that I've come up with and how I would like to do those up so I can mix and match. So that's what I'm going to show you. And it all starts first and foremost with those colors, with the color scheme. That's the most logical place to start for me. Not surprisingly, my neutral is going to be black. I have quite a few good fabric options in black. I already have a lot of accessories, a lot of clothing that's going to work, so there's no reason for me to completely change up my wardrobe. So we're starting off with black tones. From there, I am adding in red as one of my primary tones, and I have a few options for that already. The plaid wool, striped silk. I don't think I'm going to use this chiffon, but this is a color from Mood that comes in a lot of different fabric styles and silk, so options there. A few vintage pieces. So we have a good start on patterns and texture already, and I want to add a little bit more color. So next up I have this light blue sort of green tone. It's a really soft blue, and I have a few different things in it. I have this wool crepe, which is really just very wonderful color and texture. I also have this velvet, which is actually already made up into a 1920s dress, but it doesn't fit, so it's going to get remade. And I have some darker versions of it, such as this rayon, which will make up for a nice blouse. And then traveling a little bit more towards green, but still in the family, I have this bottle green wool. So this is where I'm headed for the moment. I'm also going to add in really quickly some gold and yellow tones, just to add things that I know go with the red, go with the blue, go with the green, kind of ties everything together. So this is my current color range of what I am working with. The next goal is to figure out what I'm making out of all of these fabrics. I'm starting off with a plain black slip. This is a base not only for my little paper doll figure, but also for the entire wardrobe. I will probably make multiple slips because it is so functional and can actually take the place of skirt or blouse depending on what fabric you make it out of. Next, we're going to start with the suit, the base suit. Logically, I'm starting with black. So I have a black skirt and a black pair of trousers and a black jacket. These I've already started my work on, and there's just a really simple 1920s style with a little bit of decorative details to them, but they don't have color or crazy pattern or texture, so they're going to be incredibly useful with a lot of different things. Next, I need to figure out the red wool plaid. I think it's going to be a little bit more tailored in its appearance than the black suit. I'm going to be doing it in a men's style for the early 1920s. So this, again, should go with a lot of different things. I don't think I'm going to make a skirt out of it because of the style of the coat. I don't think I'm going to need more skirts. For the green, however, I am going to do a skirt because I think that fabric is going to pleat up really well. It's a good lightweight fabric. I've already made a pair of wide-legged trousers, and the jacket for that is going to be a little bit more casual. It's not going to be tailored, it's not going to be heavily structured. It is going to have some minor detailing on it around the pockets and the cuffs, things that will match up with the skirt, but this is going to be a little more like a cardigan feel to it, so I can wear it for more casual day wear and be comfortable, or I can layer it up for warmth. I then had to figure out the dresses. I know I'm going to be using the wool crepe for one of them because it's a good lightweight fabric for that, and I wanted something that was going to match up with the black really well, black accents, so I added some little black ribbon stripes, black button detailings, black velvet collar, something on this that really accentuates the fact that it can go with all of my items that are black. So I chose this design for that reason, but I'm not sold on it yet. I just really love all the buttons. Then I have the red and black silk. I chose for this one to go with more of a jumper style dress, so that way I can use lots of different blouses. This was meant to be a very simple design that is meant for layering. Since it's not the most practical of fabrics, it's lightweight silk, it needs to be able to do day as well as evening. For that reason, I wanted something that was going to layer well. For the blouses, I figure I already have quite a few shirts and blouses, but I do know that I need some things in solid colors or in the color range that I've got, more than just black and white. So starting with that red, which I will probably end up getting a silk crepe in that color rather than the silk chiffon, but I wanted something that had some texture to it, hence all the little pleats, but has slim enough sleeves to fit under the jackets really easily. So this is meant to layer. Has a little bit of interest, but not too much going on. A very plain option is going to be out of the yellow satin. I'm sticking really simple with this one because, again, it's going to be for layering. Because it is a satin and really shiny, it's not meant to be casual as much as it is meant to work more for evening stuff, so layering over and under different garments for that purpose. I also did a really plain one out of that green color of rayon. I'm not as sure about this one. I like the design, I like the fabric. I'm not sure this is what's going to end up being the final version, but it is definitely an option that I want to try out and see where it fits, and from there I can decide if I need a different fabric or a different style. And finally, I have a lot of really nice black blouses, but I ended up coming across this embroidered fabric in black cotton. I'm going to get a matching plain cotton, and I wanted to spend some time looking into the styles that are coming out in the 19-teens and 1920s that are generically called Russian. This is something that they apply very generically in the time, and I wanted to do more research on this. A quarter of my family history is from Poland and that region, so this is something that I have had a lot of interest in for a long time but haven't had the chance to get into. So I think this is going to be a good opportunity to learn something and to have an interesting style. Then, with all of this in mind, I'm going to go with a couple of more comfortable sweater-like options, things that are warm, things that can layer over. So the tunic makes the most sense. Starting with that option, I originally knew that I wanted a black tunic just because it's practical, but I didn't want it to be plain. And I remembered that I had this beautiful velvet that would accent the edges really well. So I think this might end up getting made out of a velvet or something that really is a heavier coordinating texture. That's going to be a very warm option to layer over different things. I definitely have other sweaters as well, but I wanted a few that are really distinct to the 20s and things that I didn't have to completely knit, which is also where this option comes in. I like the idea of having a very practical, long jacket style sweater. However, finding one like this, not exactly easy, with some interesting elements that really speak to the 20s, and it's going to take a really long time to knit it from scratch, more than I have. So what I'm doing instead is I found a knit fabric that's heavier than a jersey knit, and I'm going to make the main body up in that, and then knit cuffs and collar to match. So this is going to be my throw over everything for a more casual, it's cold out situation. I will definitely come up with something a little bit more formal in the future once I know what I'm doing for my evening gowns, but I'm more concerned with my day wear and more casual evening wear right now. So that's where we are starting. Obviously, I have quite a few more pieces than they recommend, but I know me, I know how many times I'm planning on changing during the day, and in reality, the numbers game here makes sense. If I'm going on a trip for 15 to 20 days, and I've got 3 trousers, 2 skirts, and 2 dresses, that ends up giving me 7 bottom layers. So each one of those is going to be 2 to 3 times. That's pretty practical. When it comes to jackets, the same thing. Jackets and sweaters, I have 5 overgarments. Those are going to end up getting worn average 3 times or more. I'm probably going to wear that sweater a lot more than, say, the plaid jacket, but these are going to be worn probably an average of 3 times or more, which again, good. When it comes to shirts, I will have more shirts and blouses than I see here, but each one of those will probably pull 1 to 2 things because I can wear them for an evening event where I'm not doing a lot and then wear them for a day later. I also am adding a few slips. I have a gold one represented here, but I have a black one on the figure already. And that will probably be 2 or maybe even 3 plain black slips of different styles because those can serve as dresses unto their own right as well as functioning as slips. So this should cover me for 15 to 20 days with a few more shirts added to it. And that's what we're going to find out. How many outfits can I come up with that are the best use of the pieces that I've got? Obviously, I don't have accessories in any of this. That is a complication on another level, and I will probably get to that in future videos when I'm actually making the shoes, making gloves, making hats, and talking about the choices that I'm making with that process, but that's easier done once I have some of these clothes already made. I'm going to start with the hardest part, which is the dresses. So this dress has some limitations in the fact that I don't think it's going to go with crazy prints and colors. It can obviously go with the black jacket. That's a way to make it a little more tailored, dress it up a bit. That's a really easy option. It can also probably go with this tunic if I need it to be a little warmer, but not on the more formal side. I may not have that little extra belt down there. That's probably going to be a separate piece. So I think that'd be a great way to warm it up a bit. And I bet that the sweater, the long sweater, is also going to go over that really well since it's got the same tones, and that's one of the reasons why I went with a more fitted sleeve for this dress. I don't think the red plaid or the green are going to work. They're not bad. There's just a lot going on with both of those, and there's a lot going on with the dress, and it just starts to compete. They don't balance quite as well. So those are not great options for that, but that gives me 3 different options and the dress plain itself, so that's 4 different options for that dress, which is a good place to start. Next, we have the striped dress. This obviously could be worn over the slip on its own as more of an evening dress. I can put any sort of plain blouse with it, layer it with the black jacket for more day wear styles, more tailored, perhaps if it's a little cold that evening. If I want to be a little splashy, I can, I think, add the red plaid. They will go together color-wise, even if they're different prints. So I don't feel like that's too much happening, but it might be really fun once I actually make them up and try them on together. So that's a definite option for overgarments. And I have a feeling this might work as well, but it's not quite as exciting as some of those other choices. So I like the jackets with it a little bit better than the sweater, which I think is going to end up going with tons of things. The question then is what can go under it? In this case, I think the red blouse might be pretty ideal for this one. Yeah, that's pretty perfect. I bet I can then layer over the jacket of either the black or the red, so that way I have all the color coordination happening, even with different patterns and textures. So that's a definite option if I need to layer up for warmth. Then we also have, I think, the yellow blouse. We've got two different silky textures there. I think they'll go well together for something that might work for evenings. That's a really fun combination. There's actually a bit of yellow in that red stripe, so I think that's going to work perfectly. I don't think either one of my other shirts is going to work with this, just because the color of that isn't really that exciting and the collar doesn't work with it terribly well, and the black is just competing with a lot of different textures and patterns at the same time. So I think going with plain, simple blouses is going to make the most sense, but knowing that these two jackets can go really well over it and that it can go with at least two blouses gives me a good variety of options to start. Next up, let's try and figure out the plaid suit. Since that's got a lot of pattern going, it might be a little bit more complicated. I know that obviously it goes together and can go with a black or white shirt, really easy. Obviously, I think the red shirt can also go underneath of all of that. So I have definite options for the suit altogether. When it comes to changing up what goes together, this is okay, but I'm not that excited by it. I have a feeling the red blouse is going to find itself useful in a lot of other places, so I'm not as excited about that option. I feel like this is going to just be too busy, too many squares. Yeah, too much square. Obviously, I can go with the yellow blouse for a plain style. That's a definite option. Not overly excited by that. I have a feeling if I add this sweater over the plaid trousers and some sort of black blouse or plain black shirt in some way, that looks really good. The patterns aren't competing with each other too much, so I think that's a definite option for those trousers as an alternative. And not surprisingly, we can also add the black jacket over that, and suddenly we have a completely different suit. So I have the sweater, the jacket, and some blouses that I know will work. Next, let's take a look at the green suit. Obviously, these pieces go together. This jacket can go with both the trousers and the skirt. That's not the complicated bit. What I want to figure out is what other options I have. I feel like this is not too bad, but again, a little bit of competition between the patterns on that. Obviously, the yellow would do really well there in terms of a plain fabric. This might be a place for the green blouse to work really well, though they're slightly different greens, which makes me think perhaps a white and black blouse, or if I can find a stripe in white and green or black and green, that might be way better. I think that would look really good together. So I'm going to keep that in mind moving forward, because I'm not seeing a ton that's going to work with this green skirt right now in terms of the blouse options I've got laid out. So I think that green blouse might be one of my weak links. I already knew that was likely to be the case, but I know this goes with that green jacket. I guarantee it goes really well with the black jacket. That's really cute. So obviously there's still options. I just want something that I know is going to really accentuate that skirt. So that's on my potential list for blouses. The trousers, however, because they're plainer, might be able to go with more things. So that's a situation where it's a little plain going with the yellow blouse, but the black might do really well there. Oh, that's perfect. We don't have competition over texture and patterns going on, so that is the perfect situation for that blouse. That's definitely happening at some point, and I definitely have a feeling that in the more casual sense, this sweater would do really well over those trousers. There's not a lot of excitement going on there, aside from the sweater itself being shown off, but again, I can definitely have some really plain black or plain white blouses and shirts that are going to go well with all of these options. So they're not the most practical items out of the grouping so far, but they're telling me that they need things that I was already thinking about needing. In terms of the top there, not only does that look really cute over just a slip, to be honest, I bet it's going to go really well with all of the black garments that I have for base wear as well. So that's something to keep in mind. knowing that it should do pretty well with both of those. Maybe less so just because of the competing textures there, but definitely with the trousers and definitely over a plain slip. This is a good way to dress something up just a little bit. Oh, a scarf with this. Oh, I definitely need to make a good printed scarf in green. Okay, good idea. That would really tie a lot of stuff together and give some visual interest. That leaves us with the black suit, which I am not too worried about because all of these pieces go with the other two suits already. But I want to see if there's anything else we can come up with that works without suit jackets. So obviously both the skirt and the trousers are going to go incredibly well with the black sweater. There's not a lot of interest happening when I do that, but it's still really cute. I do think that the tunic is pretty ideal over this skirt. That's one of the reasons why I added that extra band, so I can cover up the detailing. It's just basically a belt sort of situation. So that is really cute, and it can go over that, or it can go over the plain black slips that I'm planning on doing. So that's a good way to make the black suit a little more casual. Obviously, lots of different blouses. If I want to do something like that, I can then just add a more colorful belt between things. So that way, if I've got a sash or a belt or something, that can break up that color so it doesn't feel like it's all black. That's definitely an option there. When it comes to that black jacket, I think that's just going to go over absolutely anything and everything that I've got. That's going to be my base. It goes over the dresses, it goes over the slips, it goes over all of the bottoms, so I am not too worried about this piece. There's just so many choices. I don't have to think about it too hard. But I like knowing that in addition to all of the jackets, that these sweaters that I've got are going to go really well over those bases as well. So I think the black suit is going to be the piece that ties it all in, and I don't have to worry too much about that. And at this point, that covers everything with at least a couple of options. So let's see how many outfits that actually ended up making up successfully, which is a fair number. Is it enough? Probably not, but I can definitely rewear things multiple times. That's not an issue. Like I said, I have other shirts. That will help. I will probably have at least one or two other sweaters, and who knows, by the time I get to that point, there might be something else, and I can also go through my closet and look for some other choices. But I think this as a base with a few more shirts, a few slips, and a couple of evening dresses and an evening cape will cover me for most things. The only things that aren't in here are obviously the evening dresses. I have two of those I'm going to make up if I have time. I already have two options if I don't. The coat, which I don't know if I'll need yet or not. It's a really heavy thing in the luggage, and I'd rather layer up if I can. So we're gonna see whether I need to make a coat or take a coat that I've already got. I'm not too worried about that just because I have so many choices. So we'll just have to wait and see what inspires me over the next few months as I get working on making as many of these pieces as I possibly can. Starting with the black suit. That's one of my next videos, in fact.